Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen. I am Halil Massey. I'm the director of the International Institute for Education Planning, where you are now. Professor, I'm delighted indeed that we are welcoming you at IEP after we have read so much of your work, about your work and of your work, and we heard so much about your work in the United States. I'm finally delighted that you made it here, and we are very honored to have you here. Dean Steele, Mrs. Steele, we are also delighted to have you here. Mr. Hammond, it's a pleasure to have you with the professor as well. Lolita, my colleague and my friend, the representative of the Minister of Higher Education and Training in South Africa. It's a delight to see you again, and I will keep you to your promise that you will visit us more often. That's something between Lolita and myself, okay? Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my colleague Leslie Limage, thank you for organizing this at IEP. It's a pleasure to have you as chairman of the policy team on within American Democrats, France. Is that the right thing?
Almost.
Almost. Okay. I have it in writing, but I do not like to read.
I do.
The topic of today is an important topic: the issue of equity. And if you allow me, Professor, before you start, we are delighted to listen to you, but I would like to share with you some thoughts which will tell you a little bit about IEP. Equity is important. Not only it is a challenge in the United States, as the topic of your call is, it is also a concern for the international community. And I'm underlining concern as opposed to challenge in the United States. It's a concern. If not addressed, it can lead to conflicts. I'm underlining conflicts, violence, political upheavals, and revolutions. Look at what happened lately in the Arab states and what is still happening in the Arab states. The day before yesterday at night, I came back from Libya, from a short mission to Libya. I was in Tripoli. I couldn't go outside because of the security situation in Benghazi. There is fighting still in Benghazi between different parties. And I was there for IEP to start supporting the government of Libya, which is in transition. Soon we will have elections on the 7th of July, and we will have a new government. Before I continue about Libya, earlier in March I was again in Libya, but I was also in Tunisia, where I've seen how the new government is trying to reform education. I was in a conference to talk about how education reform is done from our experience, my personal and the Institute's experience, which is more important. Before that, I was in South Sudan, in Juba, and my colleagues, some of them are now in Juba while we are talking. We go a lot to Afghanistan, so you can get the message. I'm talking about countries which are in conflict, emerge from conflict, then we're not sure if they will stay out of conflict, they go back to conflict. So is Afghanistan a conflict or post-conflict country? And if we go back to Libya and the Arab states, why the change, the big change which is happening and has not stopped and will take still some time to stop and will spread to other countries, not only Arab countries. It will spread to other countries. At the center of it is the issue of equity and dignity. And not only equity, it's dignity. At the center of it are the youth who finally rose up and were fearless, finally lost the fear, and finally made the change and the sacrifice. Many lives were lost. Many people are still handicapped because of many people are still suffering. And the youth in the Arab countries rose up because they wanted to overcome inequity, poverty. They were seeking and are seeking jobs. They are also seeking participation, not only jobs, and they are seeking a word, participation, in forming a better future for themselves and for the next generations. They were seeking, and they are still seeking, waiting for dignity and participation and good life. In Libya, I am shocked. It's an oil-rich country. I wished you were with me to see how poor the capital is and how underserviced it is, the poor infrastructure. I visited schools. I'm a Palestinian. I'm not from a state. I visit schools in Palestine, and I visited schools in Libya. And I told the Libyans last time in March, and told them again today, 2 days ago, our schools are much better than yours. We are a donor-dependent community. We are not even an independent country. But our schools are better than the Libyan schools in a country which is oil-rich. So it is criminal that there was inequity in Libya, and it is criminal that there is inequity elsewhere. So this is just to introduce what IAP is about, this institute is about. It's to develop capacity, it's to develop the skills of the people so that they plan better and they implement plans which hopefully will lead to better services and therefore better national development. We will be focusing, we are already focusing on equity in terms of gender, in terms of poverty, in different groups, poverty, overcoming poverty. And we will focus in the coming years on the very important sector, which is the youth sector. It is not enough, Professor, to talk about how we overcome equity and to talk about how we plan for youth. It is better if we involve youth, engage them in planning for their future. It is their future that we are planning for, with them, hopefully, not without them. This is just a glimpse about IAP, and we are delighted that you're here today, and we are eager to listen to you. And please excuse us for the partial mess you will see around the building. We are renovating the building. We are remodeling the plane while it is flying. So I do apologize, but it is a delightful opportunity for us to have you all here, and to have you especially, Professor, and I'm listening to you, and I'm sorry I took some time to introduce this and to welcome all of you, but I thought I should share some reflections about what IAP is thinking about and what we see in the field and how important it is what you're going to talk to us about. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Halil, for so willingly hosting us this afternoon. I really can't tell you how much this means to me to finally bring Professor Linda Darling-Hammond to us here in Paris for UNESCO, for OECD, for the American community, and for the future of education as we know and care about it in the world. I'm not going to make a speech because we've just heard how much Halil cares about the work he's doing. This is what happens to those of us who've worked either at UNESCO or OECD or in the field of education, as Professor Linda Darling-Hammond has done for so many years. Those of us in the room, I can introduce myself. I'm a former staff member of the UNESCO education sector, OECD previously. I've been a school teacher in England at university level and trained teachers as well throughout my career. Those of you in the room, for the most part, are also in the field of education. I won't thank you each and everyone for coming. I'll get the chance to do that at our small reception if I didn't already do so. I want to say just a couple words before I introduce Professor Darling-Hammond formally and then give her the floor. Why is this talk so important to us right now? We are all concerned not only about equity, but as education as a human right and a public responsibility. And we're mostly concerned, those of us who've been in the field for so many years, in equal opportunity for all. This is a very important time to recommit ourselves to those concepts. There are many reasons in the world today, not only conflict, not only poverty, but other kinds of agendas that are taking the forefront, and education is in many ways suffering as a result of them. One of the trends that we've noticed more and more strongly, not only in the United States, but certainly in the United States in recent years, is the move away from education, public education as a human right, and there is a trend to outsource, privatize, and create a more competitive environment for our public school systems. Professor Linda Darling-Hammond has been at the forefront for all her career of making sure that children and their teachers are the core of our education systems, that there are not other agendas. So it has been very important to me to be able to bring Professor Darling-Hammond to us here in Paris to talk about those issues. I would like to just say two more words. Why this talk is important, we've said. History. I believe that there is a trend not to learn from experience on our own, either our national histories, our institutional histories, or what we already know actually doesn't work or works. I was speaking a few minutes ago to Dirk van Dam of OECD. I worked in the Center for Educational Research and Innovation many years ago, and was talking about how we were working on things years ago that should have been serving purposes now, and we're returning to them as well. But we don't always learn in our institutions, whether they be your ministries of education, they be international organizations, or they be our governments. Whether it be the ones you're visiting now, or the ones Professor Darling-Hammond is familiar with. The next main point I'd like to draw to your attention is experience and professionalism. Professor Darling-Hammond will talk to us about how important those elements are in the teaching profession and why they must be preserved at all cost. And I just want to underline how important that is, whether it be in the field of school leaders, administrators, or teachers, experience and professionalism. And then lastly, since many of us in the room are comparative educators, that is my background, or international cooperation in education, specialists, experts, policy advisors, etc. Here again, I think we have to tell ourselves, be careful. Don't lead through ranking, league tables, using international comparison to say more than it can say. Be cautious. I think I'm going to leave Professor Darling-Hammond to speak to some of those things in the US context, but I just wanted to flag it before you start. Our agenda this afternoon, briefly, as you had it at the entrance. Professor Darling-Hammond will speak for about 45 minutes or so. Then we'll have just about that amount of time for discussion, question and comments. You're all invited to a small reception at the end of the afternoon, thanks to UNESCO IAP. At the back of the room, you have a copy and some flyers of Linda Darling-Hammond's important book, The Flat World and Education, How America's Commitment to Equity Will Determine Our Future. And I do have 4 or 5 copies available here. If particular people are interested in it, you can also order it. There is also at the back of the room probably one of the 2 or 3 most important books I've come across in American education. I think Professor Darling-Hammond will agree. It's Diane Ravitch's book that's on display, The Death and Life of the Great American School System. So you might want to know more about the publications that are at the back of the room, as well as a small reference to the education policy group that I chair with the American community of members who are affiliated to the Democratic Party. And there's a flyer about the studies group we have, the town halls we've held, either at the American University or at Sciences Po and elsewhere. So that's enough of an introduction.